America's top diplomat, who's on a visit to Israel, has said it's a decisive moment and maybe the last opportunity to reach a ceasefire in Gaza. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who's already met Israeli President Isaac Herzog, is currently holding talks with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Israel and Hamas have accused each other of lacking the will to compromise. Mr. Blinken says it's time for all sides to agree a deal without excuses.
This is a decisive moment, probably the best, maybe the last opportunity to get the hostages home, to get a ceasefire, and to put everyone on a better path to enduring peace and security. I'm here as part of an intensive diplomatic effort on President Biden's instructions to try to get this agreement to the line and ultimately over the line. It is time for it to get done. It's also time to make sure that no one takes any steps that could derail this process.
Joining me now is our correspondent Tom Bateman, who's travelling with the US Secretary of State, and our Middle East correspondent Yolande Knell, who's in Jerusalem. And Yolande, the stakes are incredibly high for this visit, aren't they?
They are indeed, and we know Mr. Blinken's just gone in to talk to the Israeli Prime Minister. This is a meeting that is taking place behind closed doors. We don't have official details, but we know that the US is really putting this bridging proposal on the table to try to bring Israel and Hamas together to overcome the outstanding issues. That following on from this Doha summit last week, where you had the US and Qatari and Egyptian mediators present, along with an Israeli negotiating team. Now, if you look at the comments, while the Americans are sounding positive, I mean, really, from the latest statements from Israel and from Hamas as well, not that same positivity. Certainly from the Israeli Prime Minister's office, they're saying that Hamas is sticking to its positions of refusal. Hamas has really accused the Prime Minister's office of adding new conditions to the negotiations, which they say are meant to sabotage the talks. I mean, you can look at the different sort of sticking points as they emerge coming out from both sides. Really, first of all, moving from the first phase of the three-phase plan, which is supposed to be the ceasefire and hostage release deal, with Palestinian prisoners being released from Israeli jails as well. And then moving from that first 6-week phase into the second phase, which should be working towards a full ceasefire. That is a problematic area. You also have where Israeli forces would remain in the Gaza Strip, which strategically important locations Israeli forces want to remain in after the Gaza war. Hamas, of course, has been demanding a complete Israeli withdrawal from Gaza. And then also we understand there are issues around the Palestinian prisoners that would be released from Israeli jails as part of all this as well.
Yolande Knell, thank you very much. Over to Tom now. You've been travelling with the US State Department parties, and there's been ramping up the language. But what other pressure can the US put on making sure that these parties come to a resolution?
Well, the way they are trying to apply pressure is by creating a sense of urgency. And you heard it there with Antony Blinken saying this is maybe, he said, the last chance and that there should be no more excuses. I think the problem is that sense of urgency and, in effect, a deadline being imposed by the Americans looking ahead to a week from now, where they're hoping to get some kind of breakthrough and to get it over the line, as Antony Blinken has said, that deadline is being imposed by Washington rather than the sides at war here. And that matters because for there to be enough incentive for both the Israeli Prime Minister and the leaders of Hamas to clinch this deal, they have to feel that sense of urgency too. And my sense is we're not really at that point. And that's why I think the American optimism is really outmatching what you feel on the ground here. The approach of Mr. Blinken, who is by his nature a pretty cautious US Secretary of State, has been quite a traditional one, which is to show sort of tough love when it comes to the Israelis in general and Benjamin Netanyahu in particular. He's not one for the sort of diplomatic arm wrench. The question now is about how tough and how much love. And I think we're going to see that over the next few hours. He's due to hold a small press conference here in Tel Aviv this afternoon. I doubt we're going to be hearing particularly sort of critical messages against Mr. Netanyahu himself. as opposed to many of his critics, both at home and abroad, who believe that he is sort of stringing the Americans along for his own political survival. Mr. Netanyahu himself says that he's just simply pushing for a tough deal against Hamas in order to ensure Israel's safety. But the fact remains that the Americans do not have a strong track record in this conflict in terms of leveraging the Israelis to change course at critical moments when they have wanted to. Now, they dispute that, really, when you push them on this. They believe that they did get the Israelis to do more about opening up humanitarian assistance and also to pull back the scale of the offensive, particularly in the south of the Gaza Strip. But I think many critics of the Americans will say they simply haven't applied enough leverage. And now you have what they are themselves describing as a critical moment where they have to push both sides, but in this part of the trip, Benjamin Netanyahu over the line, as they put it, make him take a deal and stop trying to squeeze more concessions out of it. I don't have the sense yet that they're really doing that.
And Tom, briefly, where does Mr. Blinken go next after this? On to Egypt?
Yeah, we head to Egypt tomorrow. Crucially, there will be, the Egyptians are one of the most important mediators in all of this, along with the Qataris. The role there is that they're able to pass messages much more directly to Hamas in Gaza. And so that is another part of applying this pressure. And the Egyptians also crucial when it comes to that sticking point that Yolan was talking about around the south of the Gaza Strip, because Mr. Netanyahu said that he insists that Israel will remain present along the so-called Philadelphia corridor. That's basically the border with Egypt. Israel says that's to stop smuggling and to stop Hamas rearming. Hamas say it simply means continued Israeli occupation and therefore not an end to the war. So this is a fundamental point. Brett McGurk, who's one of the key administration envoys here in the region, has been working on that with the Egyptians over the last couple of weeks, trying to create this sort of bridging proposal, which is meant to bring the two sides together on this. Their statements, both of them last night, were very defiant, sticking to their positions, digging in. That may be in part tactical in terms of negotiations, but no signs yet of a breakthrough on that. So I think what he'll be doing in Egypt will be crucial to that particular point.
Tom Bateman, thank you very much indeed.